Okay, so picture this, right? Someone helps out an old colleague just because, like, they could lend a hand on this really tricky project, no strings attached.
Hmm.
And then later, maybe months later, totally out of the blue, that simple act leads that colleague to refer them for, like, their absolute dream job.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about stories like that, and this really came through in the sources you shared with us,
Right.
is how those small moments, the ones that aren't about getting something right then, can actually build into something huge down the line. It kind of gets right to the heart of what we're diving into today.
Exactly. We are talking about networking, but forget the stuffy mixers, the awkward handshakes, that pile of business cards you forget about.
Right, the transactional stuff.
Yeah. This deep dive, and it's based on all these articles and notes and research you sent over. It's really about building, well, genuine connections, real ones.
And I think our mission here is to unpack all that material, pull out the really key nuggets, the insights from your sources, and basically give you a shortcut to being, well, properly informed on how to build a network that actually feels good,
Mm,
you know.
definitely. All right, let's jump in then. One of the first things that really hit me from this stack of material was this big emphasis on building your network before you actually need something.
Oh, absolutely. That came through loud and clear. The sources really hammer home that if you wait until you're, say, actively job hunting or you need a big favor or some specific advice,
Yeah.
you're immediately in this transactional frame of mind. And people often sense that, It can undermine the sincerity a bit.
Right. It feels less like you're connecting and more like, well, like you said, transactional, like trying to take money out of an empty bank account.
And that's exactly where that relationship bank account analogy, which popped up in a few of the sources.
Yeah, I like that one.
It's useful, right? Every time you connect, you offer some help, maybe share something interesting, or even just show some genuine kindness.
Yeah.
That's a deposit.
So that when you do need something later, and the sources point out this could be anything, really, a referral, sure, but also just someone to bounce an idea off or, listen when things are tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've actually built up that resource. You've made those deposits.
It's not just about the big asks then.
Not at all. A strong network, according to this material, is also where you find people to challenge your thinking, get emotional support during maybe a tricky career patch, or just connect with people who actually get your world.
That really does require a pretty fundamental mindset shift, doesn't it? Moving away from always thinking, okay, what can this person do for me?
Completely. The sources were super clear on this. The shift needs to be towards, what can I learn from this person? Or maybe, how can I actually help them with their goals?
That feels, I don't know, less pressured.
It does.
Yeah.
It takes the focus off the immediate transaction and puts it onto, like, mutual value and genuine interest, which, frankly, feels better for everyone.
Yeah, it makes networking sound less like a chore, actually, and more like just being interested in people.
Exactly. It turns it from this thing you have to do into just an ongoing way of learning and, well, contributing.
Okay, so we've got the mindset right. Bill before you need it. Focus on giving. Where do these connections actually happen, according to the sources? Because I think a lot of us still picture, those big formal events.
Yeah, and that was another area the material really broadened out. Networking isn't just conferences or official mixers. The sources were really emphatic that meaningful connections can spark literally anywhere.
Anywhere. Like where?
Well, think about it. A really good chat at a volunteer day, bonding with someone over coffee, even really thoughtful interactions online, like on LinkedIn maybe.
So it's less about finding the right place and more about just being open to it. Always.
That's how it was framed, yeah. Like being always on, but not in a fake way. More like approaching the world with curiosity, being open in your interactions, seeing conversations as chances to connect or understand someone better.
Okay, that makes it feel way more manageable. So how do you actually, start those conversations? What did the sources suggest there?
Finding common ground. That came up again and again as the easiest starting point, the bridge.
So like you both like the same sports team or went to the same college or...
Yeah, or hobbies where you grew up, maybe even just talking about a book you both enjoyed or something you both noticed about, the place you're in. It just creates that instant little spark of rapport.
And building on that, I noticed the sources really seem to emphasize just being genuinely interested in the other person.
They absolutely did. It makes sense, right? People naturally warm to others who seem sincerely interested in understanding them. Like really listening, asking good questions about what they care about, their goals.
Not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Exactly. That's what makes the connection feel authentic, not forced. and memorable.
It sounds almost too simple, but maybe that's why it works.
Often the simplest things are the most powerful, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of simple, the impact of just expressing gratitude was mentioned too.
Just saying thanks.
Well, maybe a bit more than a quick thanks,
Mm.
but showing you genuinely valued the chat, the time, the insight. The sources noted how these small gestures of appreciation really reinforce the connection, make it feel valued.
Okay, so you've made that first connection, found some common ground, showed you're interested. How do you make sure it doesn't just fizzle out? Because this feels like where a lot of people, myself included sometimes, kind of drop the ball.
You've hit on a really critical point there. The sources were unanimous on this. Follow-up is absolutely crucial. If you skip that initial spark often just fades, gone.
So what kind of follow-up actually works? What did the material suggest?
Well, a prompt, simple message saying you enjoyed the conversation is kind of the baseline. You should probably do that. But what seemed really effective, according to the sources, was follow-up that shows you were actually listening and remembered specifics.
Like sending them an article about that thing you were discussing.
That's a perfect example. Or sharing a link to something, maybe an event you thought they'd like, or even just mentioning a specific point from your chat in your message. It shows you weren't just, on autopilot.
And here's something that really jumped out at me from the sources, the idea of sending a handwritten note. In today's world.
Yeah, that was interesting, wasn't it? It's presented as this way to really cut through all the digital noise.
Because nobody does it anymore.
Exactly. Because it's unexpected and it takes more effort, it sends a really strong signal about thoughtfulness, about sincerity. It tends to stick in people's minds.
I can totally see that. An email is so easy to just delete or forget. A note that feels different.
It does. And to help manage all these potential connections, the idea of keeping track came up. Maybe like a simple journal or even just a basic spreadsheet.
To jot down things like who they are, what you talked about, their interests, that sort of thing.
Precisely. It's not about being like cold and calculating.
Yeah.
It's just about having little reminders so you can personalize things next time you reach out. Show you remember the details that matter to them.
Because this isn't just a one-time thing, is it? The sources really stress that.
Not at all. The material consistently painted relationship building as a marathon, not a sprint. It's about making that consistent effort over time, checking in, offering support when you can, looking for ways to add value, especially, when someone's going through a tough time.
Right. That's what takes someone from just an acquaintance to someone you actually trust and, well, maybe even rely on.
It really solidifies the bond, moves it beyond just like professional politeness into real support and friendship potentially.
Of course, like any journey, there are probably ways to mess it up. What were some of the common pitfalls the sources warned us about?
Well, one that was mentioned was this idea of putting people on pedestals.
Oh, like being way too impressed by someone's job title or their accomplishments.
Yeah. The sources sort of explain that this creates this weird, unbalanced dynamic. You forget they're just a person, with their own stuff going on.
Yeah.
It can make you seem less authentic, maybe even a bit insincere, and it just hinders a real connection.
Yeah, everyone's human, right?
Exactly. Another big trap they highlighted was being too pushy or demanding.
Ah, the classic hard sell. Like you meet someone and immediately ask for 3 favors.
Yes. The sources were really clear. That approach almost always backfires. People feel used. It breaks any trust before it even starts.
I remember that anecdote from the sources, the one about the person who kept asking their old boss for job referrals.
Oh, right. But they never just called to see how the boss was doing or offered any help back.
Never.
And the source said it got to the point where the boss just started avoiding their calls. A pretty clear lesson there.
Yeah, definitely a cautionary tale.
It really just underlines that you need balance. Stay in touch, absolutely, but be respectful of people's time, their boundaries. The foundation has to be that trust and rapport you build over time, not just what you can get right now.
And look, we can't really talk about networking today without bringing up the digital side of things. LinkedIn, obviously, is massive.
For sure. The sources definitely acknowledged how powerful platforms like LinkedIn are. I mean, it's like a global directory, right?
Yeah.
Makes it way easier to find people, connect with professionals across different fields, different countries even.
Definitely lowers the barrier to just finding people in the first place.
But, and this was a key point in the material, there are also pitfalls online. It's apparently really easy to get sucked into what one source called the numbers game.
Just collecting connections like baseball cards?
Kind of, yeah. Focusing on quantity over quality, sending out those generic connection requests, or worse, immediately hitting people with sales pitches the second they accept.
Yeah, we've probably all had those.
Right. So the sources emphasize that doing online networking well requires a bit of, well, they called it art. It needs intention,
Yeah.
personalization.
Okay, so what are some practical online tips the sources gave for making those digital connections feel more, well, real?
The absolute number one thing was personalization in your outreach. Don't just send the default, "I'd like to connect."
Right.
Mention something specific, maybe an article they wrote or shared, a project on their profile, a mutual connection you both respect, anything that shows you actually looked, you did your homework, and you have a genuine reason for reaching out.
That makes a huge difference. It makes you feel like they actually see you.
It really does. And then, once you are connected, don't just be passive. Engage with their stuff thoughtfully. Like, comment meaningfully, share their posts if they're relevant to your network. It keeps you visible and shows you're actually interested in what they're doing.
And the sources also seem to suggest not being afraid to reach out to people you admire, even if you don't know them directly.
Yeah, definitely. Proposing something low stakes, like a quick virtual coffee chat or a 15-minute call, it was presented as a good way to learn from someone's experience and start building that bridge beyond just a name on a list.
It sounds like online networking, when you do it the way these sources suggest, is also about being part of a community, not just collecting contacts.
Absolutely. It was connecting with peers, sharing your own ideas too, supporting each other's work online. It's reciprocal.
So if we try and pull all this together,
Yeah.
what's the big takeaway? What's the core message you got from digging into all these sources on networking?
You know, if I had to distill it right down, the message seems really clear. Effective networking isn't really about collecting contacts. It's much, much more about building genuine relationships.
Yeah.
It's about being curious about people, looking for ways to offer value, investing in others. It's not like a task you finish. It's a continuous process, really, a journey.
A journey of connection. And the sources seem pretty optimistic that if you lean into these habits, it can really expand your world, right? Lead to unexpected opportunities, build a fantastic support system, both for your career and just life.
Definitely. It's about enriching your life through your connections, not just trying to get ahead using them. Big difference.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, maybe something to chew on. The sources showed again and again how powerful connections can be and how often they pop up in the most unexpected ways.
Yeah, like that casual chat or a small favor, or just being genuinely curious about someone you meet day to day.
So maybe the question for you listening is, who's already in your orbit, in your network right now that maybe you haven't truly connected with yet on that deeper level?
Or looking forward, where might that next really valuable connection come from? Maybe just by staying open, being curious, and being willing to invest a little bit of yourself in the people around you.
Definitely something to think about. Well, thank you for sharing all those sources with us and for joining us on this deep dive today.
Okay, let's talk about maintaining momentum over the long haul. Building habits is one thing. Sustaining them for months or even years, which is often what language learning requires, is another challenge entirely. Life has its seasons. There will be periods where you feel incredibly enthusiastic and your progress feels rapid. There will also be periods where your motivation dips, where life gets overwhelmingly busy, or where you feel like you've hit a stubborn plateau. It's during these tougher times that your underlying systems and mindset truly get tested. One of the most powerful ways to maintain long-term momentum is to connect your English learning habits to your deeper values and long-term goals. We touched on your why earlier, but it's worth revisiting. Why did you start learning English in the first place? Is it for career advancement, to connect with family or friends abroad, to travel more confidently, to enjoy movies and books in their original language, to understand different cultures? Your why is your compass. When the daily practice feels like a grind, or when you're tempted to skip your habit, reconnecting with your fundamental reasons for learning can provide a powerful surge of renewed motivation. Write down your why. Keep it somewhere visible. Remind yourself of the bigger picture that your small daily habits are contributing to. If your goal is to get a better job, visualize yourself succeeding in that job because of your English skills. If it's to connect with people, imagine the meaningful conversations you'll be able to have. This emotional connection to your goal makes the daily effort feel more meaningful and less like a chore. Another crucial aspect of long-term sustainability is variety. While consistency in showing up is key, doing the exact same thing every single day for years can lead to boredom. And boredom is a habit killer. Think about your diet. You might eat healthy food consistently, but you probably don't eat the exact same meal every single day. You introduce variety to keep things interesting and to get a range of nutrients. The same applies to your English. Learning diet. So, while your core habit might be practice English for 15 minutes, what you do in those 15 minutes can change. One day it might be vocabulary flashcards. Another day, it might be listening to a new podcast episode. Another day, you might focus on a short grammar lesson. Another day, you might try writing a few sentences or speaking to yourself. Having a small menu of enjoyable and effective activities you can choose from can keep things fresh. Don't be afraid to explore different resources and methods. There are countless apps, websites, YouTube channels, books, and podcasts for learning English. What works for one person might not work for another, and what works for you now might not be the best. Fit 6 months from now. Be curious. Try new things. If you find a resource that makes learning feel more like fun than work, that's a huge win. This doesn't mean you should be constantly jumping from one new shiny thing to another without giving anything a proper chance. But it does mean being open to evolving your learning routine as your needs and interests change. The goal is to find a sustainable rhythm that combines consistency with enough novelty to keep you engaged. Let's also address the importance of celebrating milestones, not just the final destination. Learning a language is a long journey, and if you only wait to celebrate until you're fluent, a very subjective term anyway, you'll miss out on a lot of joy and opportunities for positive reinforcement along the way. Set smaller, achievable goals and acknowledge them when you reach them. For example, your goal might be to learn 100 new words this month. When you hit that, celebrate. It doesn't have to be a big party. It could be treating yourself to a nice coffee, watching an extra episode of your favorite show, or simply taking a moment to feel proud of your accomplishment. Other milestones could be finishing a graded reader, having your first short conversation in English, understanding an entire song lyric, or successfully navigating an English website. These small celebrations act like fuel stops on your long journey. They provide encouragement, reinforce your positive habits, and make the process more enjoyable. They remind you that you are making progress, even if it sometimes feels slow. Keep a wins list where you jot down these achievements. When you're feeling discouraged, looking back at this list can be a great reminder of how far you've already come. And what about those inevitable periods when you feel completely stuck? When it seems like you're putting in the effort but not seeing any results? This is where the concept of active plateaus versus passive plateaus can be helpful. A passive plateau is when you keep doing the same things over and over, and your learning stagnates. An active plateau, however, is when you are still engaging, still trying new things, still pushing your boundaries, even if the outward signs of progress are not immediately visible. If you find yourself on a plateau, the first step is not to panic or give up. Instead, analyze. Are you still challenging yourself appropriately? Are you incorporating enough active learning? Have your learning activities become too routine or stale? Perhaps it's time to try a new method. Focus on a different skill for a while. E.g., if you've been focused on vocabulary, maybe shift to pronunciation. Or find a new resource that reignites your interest. Sometimes just changing your approach slightly can help you break through. Consider seeking feedback if you're feeling stuck, especially with speaking or writing. A teacher, a tutor, or a more advanced language partner might be able to pinpoint areas where you can improve or suggest new strategies. Sometimes an outside perspective can see things you can't. It's also important to remember that learning isn't always linear. Sometimes you might feel like you're not progressing, but your brain is actually consolidating information in the background. Then, suddenly, you might experience a leap in understanding or ability. Trust the process, especially if you are consistently applying good learning habits. Another mental tool for long-term commitment is to adopt a growth mindset. This is the belief that your abilities, including your ability to learn a language, are not fixed but can be developed through dedication and hard work. People with a growth mindset embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, see effort as the path to mastery, learn from criticism, and find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. In contrast, a fixed mindset assumes abilities. Our innate gifts leading to a desire to look smart, avoid challenges, give up easily, see effort as fruitless, ignore useful negative feedback, and feel threatened by the success of others. Cultivating a growth mindset is incredibly beneficial for language learning. When you believe you can improve, you're more likely to put in the consistent effort required by your habits. When you encounter difficulties, like a tricky grammar point or a word you keep forgetting, you see it as a temporary hurdle to overcome through more practice or a different approach, rather than as evidence that you're just not good at languages. How do you cultivate a growth mindset? Pay attention to your self-talk. When you make a mistake, instead of thinking, I'm terrible at this, try thinking, okay, that didn't work. What can I learn from this? What can I try differently next time? Focus on the process of learning and effort, not just on results. Praise yourself for your persistence and your willingness to try, not just for getting things right. Remember that your brain is like a muscle. The more you use it in challenging ways, the stronger it gets. This journey of English learning, supported by strong habits, is ultimately a journey of personal growth. It's about expanding your world, opening up new opportunities, and discovering new things about yourself by focusing on building a sustainable system of habits, staying connected to your why, embracing variety, celebrating progress, and cultivating a growth mindset. You are setting yourself up not just for language acquisition, but for a rewarding and enriching long-term experience. Let's consider the environment in which you practice your English learning habits. We've touched on making cues obvious and reducing distractions, but your physical and even digital surroundings play a continuous role in either supporting or hindering your efforts. Think of your learning environment as the soil in your English garden. Its quality significantly impacts how well your habits take root and flourish. A dedicated space, if possible, can be incredibly powerful. This doesn't mean you need a separate room labeled English study. It could be a specific corner of a room, a particular chair, or even just a clean, uncluttered section of your desk that you associate primarily with learning English. When you enter this space, it acts as a strong psychological cue, signaling to your brain that it's time to switch into learning mode. This helps to automate the transition into your habit. What makes a good learning space? Firstly, it should be as free from distractions as possible. We've mentioned turning off phone notifications, but also consider visual clutter. A messy desk can be a mental distraction. Try to keep the area tidy and organized. Secondly, ensure good lighting and comfortable seating. If you're physically uncomfortable, it's harder to focus for even a short period. Your body needs to be at ease for your mind to work effectively. Make your learning materials easily accessible within this space. If your habit involves reading an English book, keep it on the desk. If you use an app, have your tablet or phone ready. If you use notebooks and pens, have them within arm's reach. Remember, we want to make the habit easy, and reducing the friction of getting started is key. If you have to spend 5 minutes searching for your materials every time, that's 5 minutes less of learning and an extra barrier to overcome. Your digital environment is just as important, especially since so much learning now happens online. Organize your digital resources. Create a specific folder on your computer or phone for all your English learning apps, websites, and documents. Bookmark frequently used sites. This saves time and mental energy. Consider using a browser extension that blocks distracting websites during your dedicated study times. You are essentially curating a digital space that supports focus rather than fragmentation. Think about the sounds in your environment too. Some people learn best in complete silence. Others find that certain types of music, like classical music or ambient soundscapes, can help them focus. Experiment to see what works for you. If you live in a noisy household, noise-canceling headphones can be a fantastic investment, creating a quiet bubble for your learning. The goal is to create an atmosphere where your brain can concentrate on the task of learning English without constantly being pulled away by external stimuli. Now, let's connect this to the idea of ritual. Humans are creatures of ritual. Rituals can help to transition us from one state of mind to another. You can create small pre-habit rituals to help you get into the English learning zone. For example, before you start your English practice, you might always make a cup of tea, take 3 deep breaths, or listen to one specific short, calming piece of music. This simple ritual, performed consistently before your habit, acts like a starting gun for your brain. It says, okay, English time is about to begin.